Welcome back, class. This is our last presentation on course material today. First, we're going to discuss what we've done so far in this course. We've looked at primarily a lot of the areas of psychology, the subfields and disciplines within it. In the last unit, unit number 6, we focused on applied areas of psychology. We've looked at therapy, we've looked at industrial organizational psychology, and now we'll be looking at forensic psychology by providing you a short introduction to the topic. First is forensic psychology. Well, they apply psychological principles to legal issues. They conduct research on the interface of law and psychology, help to create public policies related to mental health, and help law enforcement agencies in criminal investigations or consult on jury selection and deliberation processes. It's this last item about law enforcement where we see often this portrayed on television and on the movies. They also provide assessment to assist the legal community. Although most forensic psychologists are clinical psychologists, they may have expertise in other areas of psychology as well, such as social psychology or cognitive psychology. Some also hold law degrees as forensic psychologists. You might work in a university psychology department, law school, research organization, and so on. So here's some of the activities of a forensic psychologist, explaining why a person may contemplate committing a crime and the manner of them doing so, helping to investigate the crime and catch the perpetrators, providing guidance to those involved in civil and criminal court proceedings, providing expert testimony about the offender, contributing to the work of prisons and other ways of dealing with offenders, especially various forms of treatment and rehabilitation. Research and debates with roots in general psychology, explanations of the psychological basis of many different forms of offending behavior and criminality, studies of the psychology of memory and its bearing on the interviewing of witnesses and suspects, consideration of the behavioral and social aspects of court proceedings, construction of plausible narratives, and how juries reach their verdicts. Forensic psychology and a few related terms and other disciplines as well. We have criminology. It's the study of crime. It emphasizes social causes, patterns, developments, and ways of reducing crime. We have criminal psychology. It's the study of criminals. Forensic psychology, a branch of psychology characterized as the intersection between the law and psychology by psychologists attempt to assist the courts in order to resolve legal issues, criminal and civil. And forensic science grows out of the areas of chemistry, toxicology, physics, pathology, and so on, and other natural sciences. So let's start off with looking at the psychological involvement in the legal process. This goes back to an individual known as Daniel MacNaughton. He was a Scottish wood-turner who assassinated English civil servant Edward Drummond. He was suffering from paranoid delusions. Through his trial and its aftermath, he has given his name to the legal test of criminal insanity in England and other common law jurisdictions known as the MacNaughton rules. Daniel MacNaughton, not guilty. In the 1840s, there was no clear defense of insanity, merely a general requirement that the culprit knew what he or she was doing and knew it to be wrong. Daniel MacNaughton was found not guilty on the ground of insanity. There was a public outcry at this. It led to the clarification of the insanity defense that required these criteria became known as the MacNaughton rules. To establish a defense based on the MacNaughton rules, to establish a defense on the ground of insanity, it must be clearly proved that, at the time of committing the act, the party accused was laboring under such a deficit of reason from disease of the mind as to not know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know he was doing what was wrong. So obviously, we've seen many movies and television shows where the defense will try to suggest that they're not guilty by reason of insanity. We see it often on TV and the movies, but it should be noted that the insanity defense is rarely even tried in America. For the most part, it simply does not normally work. So it is sort of a move, a last-ditch effort to try to get lesser sentencing based on the idea that the person was crazy at the time they committed the crime. So, where did forensic psychology come from? Now that we've looked at sort of the start of legal issues and psychology coming together with the discussion of Daniel McNaughton, where did it come from? Well, it may even go back to Hugo Munsterberg. It is often identified as one of the first psychologists to apply psychological principles to the law in his book On the Witness Stand in 1908. One of the first to question the reliability of eyewitness testimony and the concern of confessions. Now, obviously, 1908, forensic psychology, eyewitness testimony. We see that researchers today still are even investigating the idea of eyewitness testimony. Recall in the chapter on memory, we discussed Elizabeth Loftus and her ideas that our memory can be quite faulty and be influenced greatly. That has a great deal of implications when it comes to eyewitness testimony. Some other important events in the development of forensic psychology. We have On the Witness Stand. We have Leichner Whitmer teaching courses on the psychology of crime in 1908. In 1909, the establishment of the Chicago Juvenile Psychopathic Institute. In 1921, psychologists allowed to testify as an expert witness in the State versus Driver. In 1962, psychologists could testify in cases of insanity in Jenkins versus the United States. In 1969, the creation of the American Psychology Law Society. And in the 1970s, the founding of scholarly journals that publish articles exclusive to forensic psychology. Where does forensic psychology happen? Here's a couple examples. We have psychology in court and psychology in investigations. In the court system, there's a process called voir dire. Voir dire is the term that roughly translated means to speak the truth. During this process in the United States, attorneys from the prosecution and the defense, both sides, as well as the trial judge, can question prospective jurors to establish whether they would be objective and fair-minded during the trial. If an attorney considers that a prospective juror's views and opinions may be biased against his or her client, they can challenge their inclusion on the jury. There's a thought that selecting the right jury can have a significant impact on the jury's decision and consequently impact the outcome of the trial. So, select the right jury, you get the verdict that you want. This suggests that we attempt to determine how they make decisions and what decisions they make or tend to make. As an example, Oprah Winfrey versus Texas cattle producers. On April 16, 1996, Oprah airs an episode about mad cow disease. Oprah was accused of whipping up anti-beef lynch mob. Food defamation trial opens in Amarillo, Texas. The Texas cattlemen sued Oprah. The cattle producers suing Oprah Winfrey under 1995 Texas law, under which people can be held liable if they make false and disparaging statements about perishable food products. Oprah hires, and her attorneys hire, Courtroom Services Incorporated, a trial consulting firm co-founded by Philip McGraw, also known as Dr. Phil. Winfrey was so impressed with McGraw that she thanked him for her victory in the case, which ended in 1998. She also assisted him in making his career in another area, television. Dr. Phil has a show. In addition to his talk show, Dr. Phil's McGraw's courtroom experiences has inspired another TV show as well. The TV show is titled Bull. So basically, based on his experience as a forensic psychologist specializing in selecting juries, they produced a television show based on, inspired by his previous cases and his previous career. In investigations, psychology can be employed a great deal. Investigative psychology, a newer branch of applied psychology that focuses on understanding and profiling criminals. The ultimate goal is to assist with solving crimes and provide empirical evidence for court cases. Now, we don't have to go into great detail about this because I'm sure everyone have seen movies and TV shows that really highlight the use of psychology in catching criminals. Criminal Minds is a case example there. So the ultimate goal here is to use psychology to understand why criminals are committing these crimes and even to predict where they may wind up a little bit later. When they're continuing producing these crimes, they want to be caught, okay, and they use psychology to aid them in their investigations. They may ask such questions as, what type of crime is this? What are the likely characteristics of the sort of individual who might commit a crime such as this? Which of the possible suspects is most likely to have committed the crime? Where is the offender most likely to live in relation to the crime? Which other crimes are likely to have been committed by the same perpetrator? Are the decisions made during the investigation free from distortion and bias? Have the lines of inquiry pursued been determined systematically? Can we get a witness to remember more? These all have psychological roots to them. So the investigators' questions, they will rely a great deal on informed psychologists to provide clarity on these particular questions. What do investigative psychologists do? Investigative psychologists perform both hands-on and abstract scientifically based research and analysis. They often examine criminal styles and patterns in order to determine and understand the offender's thought processes and psychological characteristics. As an example, they perform offender profiling that will hopefully assist the apprehending a target criminal. They also perform comprehensive analysis of the legal and investigative decisions and processes. For instance, they may interview victims, predict violent behavior, and review the involved detective's decision-making process. Criminal profiling, the goals are to provide law enforcement officials with interview strategies and a social and psychological assessment. Criminal profiling is accomplished through one of four standard strategies: clinical, investigative, typological, and geographical profiling. Clinical profiling involves psychiatrists and clinical psychologists assessing mentally ill criminals. Investigative profiling examines the style and personality of the criminal. Remember when we discussed personality previously? Personality, again, the rough definition would be a way in which we think, feel, and behave. When we know that about an individual, we can sort of predict what they're going to be doing given certain situations. Typological profiling utilizes categorized criminal types to understand the criminal. And geographical profiling analyzes the crime scene to understand the criminal. And of course, you've probably seen all of this and some of these items portrayed in movies and television shows that you viewed previously. The primary correlates of criminal behavior. Remember, correlations does not infer causation. Lower class origins, personal distress or psychopathology, family structure or parent problems, minor personality variables, poor parent-child relations, personal educational or vocational achievement, temperament, weak self-control and misconduct history, and antisocial attitudes and dissociates. The big four risks or needs factors. Symptoms of antisocial personality disorder: failure to conform to social norms, deceitfulness or lying, impulsivity, irritability and aggressiveness, recklessness, disregard, consistent irresponsibility, and a lack of remorse. Remember, with antisocial personality disorder, they don't see the world or themselves the same way that, quote, normal people would do so. We do something bad, we may feel really bad about it. Our conscience may eat at us. Someone who has an antisocial personality disorder, this may not be the case. They will simply lack remorse. They may be indifferent or rationalize having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another person. They also have a history of antisocial behavior, disruptive acts characterized by covert and overt hostility and intentional aggression toward others. Antisocial attitudes encompasses such things as criminally oriented norms, values, and beliefs regarding legal institutions and authority. And then antisocial associates, meaning they hang around people who have similar ideas or perspectives. Social learning theory also plays a role. We've discussed this previously as well. Children and then adults learn criminal behavior. This may include a lack of behavioral or self-control, modeling, and learning by observation. Of course, this does not mean that simply because someone grew up in an environment where a lot of criminal activity was going, that they too will become a criminal. But it does suggest that they will have the opportunity to have observed criminal activity and may model after some of those types of behaviors. Techniques of neutralization. The ways people neutralize or rationalize illegal actions. If you've ever talked with someone who may have different views on things and may have a little bit of a criminal perspective on things, this is what they do in order to say they're not so bad people, so bad of a person. Denial of responsibility helps to neutralize their behaviors and their illegal actions. Denial of responsibility. I couldn't help it. I have a strong sex drive. I couldn't control myself. So that denies the responsibility. Denial of injury. I didn't hurt anybody. We just took the car for a ride. Denial of the victim. He had it coming. Condemnation of the condemners. Criminal blame the system. Lawyers are corrupt. Judges can be brought. Or appeal to a higher loyalty. I did this for a friend, not myself. So neutralization is them neutralizing the behavior or downplaying their illegal behavior. And again, this could be sort of a version of a sense of defense mechanisms that we discussed previously. Biological theory of crime. Heredity in crime, twin studies, adoption studies, and neurological defects. Twin studies and adoption studies indicate there is a genetic component to criminal behavior. It may be more temperamental characteristics that are inherited than actual criminal behavior per se, meaning that if you have somebody who may be quick to anger, okay, that may get them more in a criminal situation than those who are not quick to anger. And this high hot-blooded temperament may be inherited. So that could be the reason why we see a link biologically to certain types of criminal behavior. Traumatic injuries to the brain, hormonal imbalances, and other neurobiological disturbances have been documented as factors in criminal behavior of some individuals. We also see the big 5 factors of personality. Again, we discussed this previously as well in the chapter on personality. These are a result of loads of research that has been done over many decades of personality. And these 5 themes kept appearing. Openness to experience and creative and open-minded and intelligent. Conscientiousness, competent, orderly, self-discipline. Extroversion, sociable, positive emotions, excitement seeking, agreeableness, trustworthy, altruistic, compliant, and neuroticism, anxious, angry, hostility, and impulsive. So by understanding the personality traits that we may most often see in criminals, we get a better understanding of who these individuals are, and that will enable the forensic psychologist who's working on investigations to more readily understand the criminal that they're hunting and be able to predict what they may do given certain situations. Now, we've talked about antisocial personality disorder, and we can see again, based on the big 5, what characteristics of behavior we would tend to see. This is from the DSM, from a previous DSM version. This is number 4. What we see by some of the characteristics here: disregard for the rights of others. At least 3 of the following types would fit into someone who follows the APD symptomology here. Behaves in a way This is grounds for arrest, deceitful and manipulative, impulsive, aggressiveness, irresponsible, lack of remorse. Age 18 or above, a history of childhood conduct disorder, uh, antisocial behavior, not a product of schizophrenic or manic episode. That last one there is saying they can be antisocial, but it's antisocial not because of them suffering from another disorder like schizophrenic or some sort of manic depressive episode. Here, it's just by itself. So this would be some of the criteria that we would see with somebody that would be designated as an antisocial personality disorder. 3 points about psychopathy and symptoms. Psychopaths have all the outward appearances of normality. They do not have hallucinations or delusions. Psychopaths appear unresponsive to social control. They continue to get in trouble even after punishment. Criminal behavior is not a necessary requirement for the diagnosis of psychopathy. Some symptoms are superficial charm and glibness, inflated sense of self-worth, constant need for stimulation, lying pathologically, conning others, being very manipulative, and so on, shallow emotions, a lack of empathy. So the idea is that sometimes individuals may have certain disorders and they're not going to be readily apparent to people. They may on the surface appear quite normal. So what else do we know about the mind and behavior of these individuals, particularly the individuals who take someone's life, the behavior of killers? The first question should be, what does it mean to kill from a legal perspective? 3 basic types of homicide. We have justifiable, excusable, and criminal homicide. So excusable homicide, these are accidental or unintentional killings. To be excusable, it must be shown that the killers did not act with negligence. Justifiable homicide, these are killings judged to be acceptable because they occurred in defense of life or property. This type of homicide is out of necessity. And then you have criminal homicide. These murders are illegal killings and can be classified into different hierarchical categories like first degree, second degree, or felony murder. Here are some of the clarifications. First-degree murder are committed with premeditation and deliberation. Basically, the idea is that someone planned to kill someone and they carried it out. Second-degree murder are committed without premeditation and are typically the spur-of-the-moment killings. This type of person kills because they exhibit extreme indifference for the life of another and intended serious injury. And then we have felony murder, a killing that occurs during the commission of another felony, such as a robbery. In most jurisdictions, the felony must be a violent one. Felony murders are one of the more common ways a person is sent to death row. Now, we have multicide. Yes, we have a term for killing more than one person called multicide. They can fall into the category of mass murder, spree murder, or serial murder. Mass murder, someone who kills 4 or more victims in one location in one incident. The killings are all part of the same emotional experience. Mass murderers often kill themselves after they have completed their deadly rampage. Most offenders are white males, middle-aged, frustrated, and very angry. Mass murder typically takes place in one of 3 locations: the home, the workplace, and the school. Spree murder, when someone murders at 2 or more separate locations, but with no emotional cooling off period between homicides. This is at least common of the 3 types of multicide. The trigger for the spree killers can be fairly minor, but once the spree killer begins, the killing typically only stops when they are killed, captured, or they commit suicide. And then we have the one that we hear most about, portrayed on movies, television shows, and documentaries: serial murder. Someone who has murdered on at least 3 occasions, with what can be called a cooling off period between each incident. This cooling off period can be days, weeks, months, or even years. Each event is emotionally distinct and separate. In serial murder, there is no prior relationship normally between the victim and the attacker. The motives are normally for dominance and power over the victim. Subsequent murders are sometimes at different times and have no connection to the initial murder, and so on. Current research suggests that during the year, on average, around 35 serial killers are active. Most are white men in the age range of 20 to 30 years. Well, serial murder. Research on the commonality of serial killers suggests a homicide triad, which is bedwetting past an appropriate age, cruelty to animals, and fire setting. Now let me explain to you a little bit about how we know these things about serial killers or serial murderers. When they are caught, they are investigated quite clearly. They are investigated deeply. They are going to be interviewed. They're going to take all sorts of personality assessments and tests. In fact, the FBI and other criminal psychologists are very much interested in interviewing these people who have been captured, and they learn about their childhood. They learn about what they thought about when they grew up. They learn about their behavior when they're a young person. By doing all this research, they were able to identify certain commonalities between all the variety of serial killers like Ted Bundy that provided a great deal of interviews before he was put to death. Many past serial killers have demonstrated at least two of these commonalities: bedwetting at an inappropriate age, animal cruelty, and fire setting. That is one of the reasons why when you are, let's say, a local police officer or sheriff's deputy or sheriff in a particular jurisdiction, and you find a bunch of mutilated animals that have been tortured, that really is a warning shot in a way, suggesting that you may have somebody who's developing into these serial murder thoughts or fantasies, and they're starting to live them out. So, psychological profiling. The FBI has divided offenders into two distinct profiles based on hundreds of interviews with known and incarcerated murderers and serial criminals. These categories are powerful and sophisticated tools based on years of profiling violent offenders. Profiling is based on the premise that offenders' personalities and motivations are revealed in the specific nature and characteristics of their criminal behavior. This behavior can be analyzed by the crime scene and victims they leave behind. We see historical events. We have the Jack the Ripper case in the late 1880s. 1937, Babes of Inglewood murders, Adolf Hitler, 40 to 56, the Mad Bomber. FBI agents in 1960 teamed with teachers at the School of Criminology, University of California. In 1970, we have the Behavior Science Unit created at FBI. This is what is portrayed mostly in the TV show Criminal Minds. In 1984, we have the National Center for Analysis of Violent Crimes established. In 1985, Crime Classification Manual was published. All of this helped to understand criminals and criminal behavior much better to allow for greater possibility of apprehending them. The profile characteristics of organized versus disorganized offenders. You have the organized types and disorganized types. There's two basic broad classifications that were designed, and by these characteristics alone we can see what types of things we know about an individual based on the type of crime scene they leave behind. Alright, so we're running out of time here, so let me go ahead and wrap it up here. Just to give you some greater idea, there are four major typologies that we have for these serial killers. They fall in the category of visionary, mission serial killer, power control, or hedonistic pleasure-seeking serial killer. You've probably seen these various types of serial killers in movies and TV shows that you have witnessed. I have on the PowerPoint slides a little bit of a blurb about each one. One that I will point out real quickly here is the mission style of serial killer. There's a TV show, it's been off TV for a while, but I do believe it's on some of the streaming service, and that's a show called Dexter. You have someone who believes they have a certain type of mission that they need to complete, and that's the main thing that drives their particular type of behavior. Alright, we'll end there.